Hello again from Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We're broadcasting from Rigel Studios here in Las Vegas, Nevada. This show is about guns-related political issues and self-defense. This special edition, which we're putting up at roughly 1 o'clock today, is separate from my normal show, which will come on later today. But my favorite attorney, Don Greene, has been in touch with me about a whole lot of changes that are coming up in the legal system that will affect law-abiding gun owners, that are things you can certainly trip over. He's been working on that for at least a week now to update everybody. So here we go with a special report from my best attorney, my best gun attorney, Don Greene. Welcome, Don.
Thanks, Bob. And of course, we want to thank Rigel Studios and the listening and viewing audience for their continued participation and support. May we have the first graphic, please? This is the brawl at the brand new In-N-Out Burger in Colorado. People are fighting over hamburgers after waiting 8 hours in line. It's close to insanity. Bob and I are going to discuss what might happen when you find yourself in this kind of a situation as part of our continuing duty to advise the public about what you should do in a case involving situational awareness. Now, situational awareness, Bob, can you define that for your audience, please?
Well, situational awareness means simply to be aware of your surroundings. Don't be looking down all the time at your feet. Look around, be aware of who's near you. You try and stay away from problem areas, avoiding large crowds, shop in the middle of the day instead of at 3 o'clock in the morning. Take someone with you other than children. So there's more of you in the group. 2 or 3 people are much less likely to get into trouble. If this can happen at an In-N-Out, as you just saw in that video, it can certainly happen anywhere to you.
And Bob, we know that you teach this at your classes, but would you advise your average CCW holder, your student, to continually exercise situational awareness and go to additional classes and engage in additional training, and why?
Well, certainly. Your skills at anything diminish. If you don't drive your car for a year, you're not going to be the world's best driver trying to rush some friend of yours to the hospital. Firearms and awareness take continued training. The worst thing that can happen, and I'm sure you've had it happen, Don, is you have a client who fired a gun at somebody with decent cause and missed and hit some bystander, and then you discover that he hasn't touched his gun in the last 6 or 7 years, so his skills were essentially zero. The lawsuit lawyers are waiting for that. Here they come.
And that's one of the first questions I ask my client on the stand in a self-defense case in front of the jury. Question: what training, in addition to your CCW class, have you engaged in over the past 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years? The wrong answer is none. And I can't tell you how many times Bob and I have been at gun shows in the past. We've only had one this year because of COVID-19. But in the past, literally dozens and dozens of people have said, well, the only class I need, according to the law, is the CCW. And we say, fine, if that's what you believe, here's 50 cents because you're going to be calling us from the detention center because you've been charged with murder. Yep. So it's very important to get these classes. And not just the online classes, we're talking real world training. And Bob, what is the advantage of real world training?
The advantage of real world training is you can ask questions and get an answer to your question. And you'll be talking to a local instructor if you're taking this class to recertify in Nevada, who will tell you what's going on with Nevada law. not what some television show tells you is going on in New York City. It won't apply here. The laws, the rules are different state to state, sometimes county, sometimes city to city in the same state. You've got to have a local instructor who knows that, preferably one who has appeared in court a few times, so he knows what you're in for.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell your audience right now that we have several CCW instructors throughout Clark County who actually call me during the course of these these CCW classes, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. If I'm available, I call right back or I answer the phone, and they actually put me on the speakerphone, and we provide this real-world, real-time information to the clients and to the students. And that's the value of programs like this. So I encourage you to look at our prior broadcast to see when this all started last year with Dayton, Ohio, and the Walmart shooting in El Paso, when Bob and I were telling people you need to start focusing on these particular scenarios and look at these real world situations, which like we're presenting today. May we have the next slide, please? Okay. Many people are interested in buying AR-15 and AK-47 and HK type pistols, which to many people in the world look like rifles, but they're actually classified as pistols. And if you see at the end of these where the buttstock is, some of them have a piece of Velcro that you can wrap around your forearm. Some of them have what appears to be a cut-off buttstock, and some of these are actually just they're braces. Now, several years ago, during the Obama administration, the original arm braces for these pistols were approved on not less than 3 times during the Obama administration by the ATF. Now, under the Federal Administrative Procedure Act, before an agency can make a new ruling or a new law or a new regulation, they have to publish that regulation in the Federal Register for 90 days. Now, let's fast forward to December 16th, 2020. The ATF issues what we call ATF 1, a ruling where we're going to change the basis of identifying and defining the arm brace on a particular particular AR-15, AK-47 type weapons. Now, there was so much furor, so many people had called in, so many people had sent emails objecting that, guess what? We have the ruling ATF 2, which within the past week and a half, now the ATF today, the ATF has issued a ruling. Wait a minute. We think we're going to reverse that other ruling and take something under consideration. That's only been a period of 2 weeks. Bob will explain something at the end of this show on the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police briefings, but to tell you that these things change constantly. So when you go to a CCW class, when you take a class online, when you read something online, you've got to follow up on that or call the lawyer, call myself. You can call me on my cell, 702-409-8239, and and if I don't know the answer, I'll get it to you right away. We almost always know the answer because this is what we do. May we have the next slide, please? All right. Now, many people have come up to me and said, I was denied a firearm because of various reasons. But everybody's got to realize that as of October 1st of 2020, we have a new Form 4473 from the ATF. And at the beginning of that form, unlike the previous editions, it actually identifies the firearm, the barrel length, the caliber, the type, and the firing mechanism right up front. Usually you didn't see that until page 3 or 4 of the ATF Form 4473. But we have a decision which came out of the federal court in Denver just within the past 2 weeks, in which a person between a 2-year period had purchased 106 firearms. And he had stated to a couple of people that he was sending these firearms out of the United States to a country, Mali, to set up a gun business. Well, the ATF and or the FBI found out about this, and he was arrested. Now, his very sharp attorneys filed court papers, and this is why this area of the law is changing almost daily. And I have a decision of December 16, 2020 out of federal court in Colorado. And let me read the last paragraph because it's very important. Notwithstanding the evidence purchased these weapons for resale in Mali, I conclude that the United States has not demonstrated probable cause to believe that the defendant made a false statement when the defendant signed on the Form 4473 that he was the actual buyer or transferee of the weapons. There is no probable cause to believe that the defendant committed the charged offense. Based on the evidence I, the judge, have seen, there were other likely offenses committed in connection with the purchase or export of the handguns. But the government has not shown probable cause of making a false statement to a licensed firearms dealer. Here are the points. In this form, there was no intention by Congress to regulate a secondary gun market, which was excellent lawyering. Second, the ATF instructions did not give instructions as whether you resell it in the future. And third, the United States admitted that someone who buys a gun with the intention to resell actually qualifies as a buyer if at that moment I say, I'm a buyer. Now, if you say to the ATF, oh, I'm buying these to give away as presents, or I'm going to go sell them tomorrow at another gun show, that's a different story. And there was no reasonable inference that this defendant had purchased the guns at that time to send them to the country of Mali. Now, we have a trial coming up in March of this year on the sale of 200 firearms here in federal court by a private seller. Now, it's a rather difficult case, but part of this overall analysis is that we can see that these laws are changing constantly. And although my client was indicted over a year ago, and because of COVID-19, the case has been continued, you can see that the law itself is changing constantly. May we have the next slide, please? In the Supreme Court, just this week, December 28th, 2019, and this is where I'm going to ask Bob a question, because it may come up in Nevada in the future with our Democratic Assembly and our Democratic Senate. The New York Pistol Association has filed court papers in the U.S. Supreme Court on the following question: whether the Second Amendment allows a state to prohibit ordinary law-abiding citizens from carrying handguns outside the home for self-defense. Now, Bob and I have been talking about this issue on the Nevada legislature, maybe even trying to limit handguns or the carrying of handguns either in a concealed form or open carry. Bob, do you see in this next legislature, which starts next week, do you see the possibility that that the democratically controlled Assembly and the Senate will try to do something concerning the possession or carrying of firearms?
Absolutely. The Democrat side has stated over and over that they intend to get rid of guns, both on the federal level. We've got this going on with the new administration coming in Washington, and we have it going on here with the majority of Democrats basically controlling both houses and the governor's mansion. They're going to pass whatever they're going to pass. We don't have any bulletproof. They have a bulletproof majority actually in both houses when the new Assembly and Legislature meet, Assembly and Senate meet, and they will simply pass whatever they are going to pass. The Republicans and there are a few what we used to call blue dog Democrats that believe in gun rights. They're going to get run over by their own radical party. And I expect we're going to have every left-wing possible gun law go through in Nevada, and look out, here it comes.
So essentially, Bob, we have another 2 years. We have one legislative session this year, and the law would become effective in January of 2022, unless there are some kind of special requirements which are made to allow these laws to become effective in June or October. And Bob, what can the average citizens do? Those people who observe the gun laws, what can they do now to try to avert what could be a firearms Armageddon?
What they can do now is start working for more conservative, gun-friendly candidates, because we will have an election in 2 years. The governor, I think, is not up. He'll still be there. But the legislature, the lower house changes every year, just like the lower house in Congress. We gained, conservatives, pro-gun people, gained a lot of seats in the United States lower house, and I expect we will gain a lot of seats for anything that's up for election upcoming, because between now and the next 2 years, the Biden administration people, with the help of the local government in Nevada, are going to be coming around to pick up your unlawful guns because of the way they look or the magazine capacity or whatever. It's in the cards. They're bragging about it online, how they're going to do this. The Biden-Harris administration is set to do it. And our legislature and our Democrat state government has said over and over they're going to do that. I would take them at their word. Start helping conservative candidates get elected so they don't keep their majority in these houses more than the 2 years. Your guns literally depend on it.
Bob, 2 years ago in 2019, when we had the debate concerning the universal background check in Nevada, which mandates background checks for all sales of firearms, including between private seller and buyer, we had a series of hearings before the Senate, the Nevada Senate Judiciary, and the Nevada Assembly Judiciary Committees, a joint session which I testified at one in February of 2019. Can you suggest to your viewing audience and your listeners to attempt to contact their particular representatives and senators to see if we can have yet another open and robust debate concerning these firearms issues?
Well, it's possible to do that. The problem that exists is this next 2 years with their bulletproof, literally bulletproof majorities. The assembly people in Nevada can do nothing about it. I've had several conversations in the last 2 weeks, for instance, with Richard MacArthur and others who are Republicans, conservatives, who got elected, and basically because the Democrats control all the committees, they set the agenda in all the committees, they're not going to be able to do anything this year and into next year a little bit. But we can change this before Biden and his associates get all your guns. Support those candidates. Get out and walk for them. Tell your friends to vote for them. If you don't get involved, your guns are gone. Literally. We have no way to stop it in the next year and a half. After that, yes, there is, because we have another election.
May we have the next slide, please? In following as a bridge to what you're saying right now, Bob, we had an important decision in May of 2020, but it's come up in the past week in the state of Washington, and this affects Nevada in our red flag law. And in Washington, a panel of judges ruled on the following question of whether it was constitutional under Washington law to force the surrender of firearms for a person who was awaiting trial where his guns were taken like under this red flag law type situation. And the panel of judges in Washington issued a massive ruling. I mean, this ruling is incredibly detailed, and it is approximately, the index is like 6 pages. It's 122 pages long of a full analysis, especially under the Fifth Amendment and the Due Process Taking Clause. Now, Bob, in 2020, our red flag law became effective. And can you tell the audience what is the red flag law?
Essentially, it's a sworn statement that one of your relatives, there's all sorts of, I said it's pages and pages, how closely related you are, if you're living in the same house, if you're living in the house in a detached garage or an attached garage, if you share some livelihood with the individual, and you wish to tell the court that you think old Uncle Fred is losing it and you're afraid because he has a gun, the government then can use that statement to come and preemptively take his guns away, although no overt act has happened already. That's the red flag law. You lose your guns and your self-defense rights without trial, without a judge, other than looking at the paperwork saying, I believe that. And the first thing you know, literally, is the police show up at your door and say, let's have your guns.
And haven't we had a number of sheriffs in Nevada, the 17 counties in Carson City, haven't we had a number of sheriffs who have said they're not going to enforce this law?
Yeah, we've had bunches of them, and bunches of them nationally said the same thing, that they're not going around to take guns away from people who haven't done anything yet on some third party's opinion that he might do something wrong. Supposedly, they can go to a judge and get a warrant, so at least a judge has heard one side of the case. But in most of these instances, the judge hasn't seen anything. It's done by a police agency on their own volition. We're not talking about dangerous situations where somebody's firing rounds off their patio at the neighbor's house. We're talking about guys who haven't committed a crime yet, and we have a preemptive takeaway on the guns. And of course, being the left side, they add any magazine that holds more than 7 or 10 shots and has a detachable magazine and looks like a military type rifle when it is not, et cetera, et cetera. The law basically grinds directly against individual rights in the United States. This is a draconian law that needs to be out of existence.
I agree with you. And in the year and a half since this law became law this year, passed last year, I have not had a single case come to my office in which the police were called solely for the purposes of the red flag law to seize the weapons. The cases which I have had have been calls to the police, but the persons having the firearms were otherwise disqualified from owning the firearms, prior felons, illegal aliens, and people, men and women, who were charged or had been convicted of battery domestic violence. So I have not had, and I have a lot of gun cases, so it's either that the people are going to other lawyers, or that the police are saying, we're not going to enforce this because we believe it's unconstitutional, but when someone is otherwise prohibited from having the firearm, again, felon, illegal alien, battery, domestic violence, we're going to seize the weapons, which they're not going to have them anyway because it's against the law. May I have the next slide, please? Okay. We have a slide here that talks about Las Vegas gun stores are reporting that while the businesses can still be opened, there's been a spike in sales of guns, especially if first-time persons and in this situation. Bob, do you have any ideas? Do you have any insight on the purchase of firearms in Nevada this year in general and after the election?
Well, starting mid last year, according to National Shooting Sports Foundation that tracks all this stuff, the gun sales have gone up every month since last April. May beat April, June beat May, et cetera, et cetera. Every month, the number of gun sales increased. And the increases they are tracking where they can. About 40% of the people that are buying a gun in that time period are first-time buyers, which means they are buying the gun and don't know anything about it. I know the dealers will try and tell them that all dealers do that. You need to come take a class on safety, on use or misuse of force, and the people don't. The largest increase is among minorities by far. First-time buyers that are black are better than 60% in some states. The numbers are huge. They're getting the gun for self-defense, specifically because they're afraid of somebody breaking into their house or their car or whatever, but not taking any instruction. The dealers, trust me, do their best by offering free classes and 20-minute lecture about you got to go call this guy and take his class. It's only 2 hours long, but you need to understand when you can use this and when you can't use it. And they go, sure, and usually don't come to class. And they are, unfortunately, creating a lot of shootings that go into litigation. Particularly in states that have severe restrictions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on my show later this afternoon. But the problem is first-time buyers with no instruction. They'll sell you a car, but they give you a driving test. We don't want a physical test for you to have a gun because then we got to decide if blind people can have one or how blind they are, or crippled people or how crippled they are. Can a person in a wheelchair run away? Well, he can roll away really fast, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very personalized thing, but you have to take the training or you're going to be the guy that gets in trouble, falls over some law that you had no idea existed. When you're involved in a shooting or a pointing of a firearm, do two things: shut up and lawyer up.
Absolutely.
Right then.
Bob, right before Christmas, we had a situation where a woman in Clark County had purchased a firearm and shot her kid to death.
Yep.
And here's the point. The woman had just purchased the firearm, according to the news, and went with her friends outside of the apartment and went over to the car where she had the firearm inside the car, not in the home, and then took the firearm out and had her finger on the trigger, shot the child. I didn't know it was loaded. Well, someone loaded that weapon. Two problems: absence of training and no knowledge of the operational characteristics of the weapon. Now, I'm going out on a limb because I've already contacted my local senator and my local assembly person, and they're both Democrats. And I'm going to tell them that I'm going to renew this point again, that prior to the purchase of any firearm in the state of Nevada, whether a private sale or a sale through a firearms dealer, you must take a 2-hour gun safety class. Once you take that safety class, go buy the firearm, go through the background check, but at least you've got that safety. And I think it's going to weed out a number of people who are going to say, do I really want to own the firearm? Or at least I've gone through some minimal training prior to even having that firearm. And I got a lot of nasty calls when I proposed this a couple of years ago from people saying, am I some kind of anti-gun nut? No, I'm just talking about these are real world examples. May we have the next slide, please? Now, we've had a number of questions since the election. I've had an inordinate number of people who have been calling me, and they've moved here from California for whatever reason, whether to escape COVID or the taxation or the draconian laws they have there. But in California, there's a process called a certificate of rehabilitation for certain felonies and misdemeanors. So the thing is this, that there's a law in California that says, like, for example, a battery domestic violence. After 10 years, it says you can get your record expunged and get a firearm. Now, I've been telling people for years, so what? You can't get a firearm. Why? The law state of California says I can. Yes, but the federal law, 18 United States Code, section 922G, states you cannot have a firearm because it is a lifetime ban unless, one, you've received a pardon of the governor of the pardoning authority in that state, or two, you have received an expungement of the crime by the court of competent jurisdiction and you are firearms eligible. Without that determination, the feds will reject and constantly reject. And just in the past, since the election, I probably had about 10 of these cases under the California Penal Code, which allows for the supposed allowing you to have a weapon under the law. It's a hollow remedy, and I keep telling these people, and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has been sending the letters to people denying CCWs on the grounds that this law in California does not restore your right to own a firearm as defined under federal or Nevada law. End of story. So if we can go back to the slide, please. So in California, if you're going to get a certificate of rehabilitation, make sure that the expungement says you are firearms eligible. Now, two, you cannot have been convicted of a crime while using a firearm. There's no expungement of that. And number two, corporal punishment on a spouse, battery, domestic violence. You can't do it through the rehabilitation process. You have to get a pardon by the governor of the state of California and the pardons board. And I can tell you right now, given the political leanings of the current governor of the state of California, I think that the probability of you getting a pardon on a misdemeanor, battery, domestic violence, you can get a firearm is probably zero.
Zero. Yeah.
So for all you out there who have this certificate of rehabilitation, or for all of you who have been convicted of battery, domestic violence, or what's known as corporal punishment on a spouse, I believe it's California Penal Code 240, 241, or 242. There's two sections of the statute. One's a regular battery. One's that has the special defined relationship, wife, husband, cousin, related by blood, roommate, girlfriend, boyfriend, etc., child. You need to call me, or you need to make sure that when you go get a certificate of rehabilitation, if it's possible, that you make sure that your attorney in California tells you that you're firearms eligible in your papers. And if you don't know any California attorneys, call me, email my office, and we'll provide that. We just did this not 48 hours ago in my office, where I had a couple come in, and I sent them to a lawyer in California. And although, as of yesterday, I've been licensed in the state of California 37 years, it's too expensive for me to go down there. So I like to save my clients money, get a local attorney down there who knows what he or she is doing, and get this done. Now, may we have the final slide, please? Right after this. All right, Bob, we've gone over these subject areas. Now, we've gone over the new Form 473. Now, Bob, can you tell us about what's going on with the police and guns and their daily briefings, and have your comments?
Well, yeah, first I want to go back for just a moment to the required training that you are talking about having for people who purchase firearms. I understand and agree with the theory that they all should have some type of firearms training, but putting that into the law would be an infringement upon their rights to have a firearm. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the government can force you to take training. There are some things that dealers can do, but adding a 2-hour class, even if it's free, would not pass muster of the plain wording of the Second Amendment. It's an infringement on their time, and although I agree it's a good idea, I don't think I taught, I taught hundreds and hundreds of concealed carry classes, and there was always somebody in the class who didn't get it, whose questions told me that he needed training with firearms. Mm-hmm. And we had a solution that I was able to develop that helps to some degree. We had anybody purchasing a firearm of any type sign a waiver that says, I understand that this can only be used against another human being or wild animal in immediate defense of a life-threatening situation. And I understand I have been advised to go take some training. And I understand that if I don't do that, I'm going to very likely get myself in trouble and end up in jail. And if they don't choose to sign that waiver that promises to get the training, but it lists all the reasons why they should get it, if they won't sign that, I wouldn't make the sale of the gun. Gun dealers are still free not to make the sale for any reason or no reason. And it helped us because it forced them to get the training or made them sign the waiver that said if they don't get the training, they're going to probably go to jail. And it let us out of the lawsuit that said, you shouldn't have sold this guy a gun because he's obviously crazy, and it's your fault because you sold him the gun. So I skate around the issue of selling a gun to somebody who makes some idiot statement. Now, if they would say, as we had happen in a couple of cases I've talked on the air several times, a lady that came in and said she was in her 80s, wanted an AK-47 because she wanted to shoot her landlord, that son of a bitch. We made the decision not to sell her the gun. And by the time the officers arrived, which was a few minutes later, they explained that she can't buy a gun if she's threatening to kill somebody. And then she attempted to buy the gun the officer was carrying on his belt instead, or just borrow it for a few minutes, and she'd bring it right back. Some people shouldn't have a firearm, but you can't get around the Second Amendment by deciding who is who. I agree there needs to be training, and the waiver really helped us because it made them aware of what the problems are. There are always things that are going on in the legal side of this that don't make sense, but the Second Amendment is exactly what it says in plain English. The right to the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Now you see why I received hate mail a couple of years ago, and probably in a few months when this may come up before the Nevada Senate and Judiciary and Nevada Assembly Judiciary Committees, why I might receive hate mail again. Again, would that have saved the life of that couple-year-old girl that was shot right before Christmas? I think so. Especially because of the mistake, leaving the firearm overnight in the car, showing it off to your buddies or your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and then firing the weapon. It's just a matter of training. And we see this all the time. And Baba sees it, and I see the worst situations in my practice. Any final comments on the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police briefings?
Yeah, the officers are dealing with a really tough problem here. We're talking about laws that change literally in 10 minutes, from some court decision on the federal level to some state court decision locally, or a decision in the Henderson Municipal Court that said this or that, or an edict from the city of North Las Vegas that in North Las Vegas you can't do this or that, that is not published anywhere really, but you have run into violation of it. When you are, the police get their briefings in the morning, and they all sit in their little ready room and get a half an hour or so of what's going on. You know what we got an armed robbery at this location, look out for that. We've had gang activity at this bar, you might do extra drive-throughs. We've had residential burglaries in 6 of 7 apartments at this particular address, usually at 3 in the afternoon, so why don't we be sitting on those if you've got a moment to do that. They can't possibly keep up with the court decisions that are changing every day. If the officer tells you, I'm sorry, but you know, when you asked, do you have a gun in the car? We have an ordinance that says you can't have a gun in your car. And you're right now in North Las Vegas or Henderson or wherever it is. And he didn't know the ordinance changed. You say, well, that's not the law anymore, officer. I just checked. And he can call and check with dispatch and check with the city attorney in a matter of a few minutes and go, whoops, sorry, they changed that while I was out here on patrol, you know? So they can't possibly keep up with the law. Give them a break. Street cops are on your side. When they're out on patrol, they're leaving their families at home unprotected. And believe me, that weighs on every cop in the United States. So give them a break. Be courteous. Leave your hands in view when you're stopped. And put your hands on the steering wheel and politely say, officer, I have a gun in the car and I have a permit, or I don't have a permit, or whatever the case may be, and it's in my boot or it's in the glove box. And leave your hands in view while you're telling him that. He will be greatly appreciative of that. He's on your side. The street cops really are on your side. Try not to screw with them. They don't deserve it.
Well, thank you, Bob. And I want to thank Rigel Studios for a great year of assisting us in presenting these special bulletins and these particular points over the course of, well, all this year and all last year. Yeah. And I wish everyone a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Happy New Year. I'll be up with my own show around 5 o'clock this afternoon. It'll go up. And this one's going up on the air right now. Please share this one with your friends and neighbors. A lot of information here from Don Greene that is really hard to get. Pay attention. Have a Happy New Year.